Right now, as you're watching this, a 2-week ceasefire exists between the United States and Iran. 2 weeks, announced by President Trump on April 7th, accepted by Iran, and already showing signs of breaking under pressure. A 2-week ceasefire is not peace. It's a pause, and both sides are using it to prepare, not to resolve. What comes next is a step-by-step breakdown of what happens when this conflict reignites, and every detail is already unfolding in real time. If you're gaining value from this, make sure to subscribe. Many of you already know what's been happening with the channel, and if you want to support, there's a link in the description. I've spent months researching what's coming between 2026 and 2030. And I've put everything into an ebook titled The Next Global Shift: How to Stay Ahead of Economic Collapse and War, the economies, the conflicts, the decisions you need to make. If you want it, the link is in the description. This story begins in 2015, when the United States, Iran, and several global powers signed the nuclear agreement known as the JCPOA. Iran committed to reducing its enriched uranium stockpile by 98%, cutting its active centrifuges by roughly 2/3, and allowing international inspectors full access to its facilities. In exchange, Iran received approximately $100 billion in sanctions relief. That deal held for 3 years. In 2018, President Trump withdrew the United States entirely, arguing it was inadequate because it ignored Iran's ballistic missile program and regional actions, and Washington reinstated sweeping sanctions. Those sanctions slashed Iran's oil exports by more than half, and the resulting economic pressure strengthened factions inside Iran that had always believed resistance was the only viable path forward. Iran's response started gradually, then accelerated rapidly. By late 2023, Iranian centrifuges were producing uranium enriched to 60% purity at a pace of roughly 9 kilograms per month. While weapons-grade material sits at 90%, nuclear experts concluded that Iran had already stockpiled enough 60% material that, with further refinement, it could produce enough for multiple nuclear weapons, not just one, but several. June 2025 marked the collapse of public diplomacy. The IAEA officially declared Iran in violation of its non-proliferation commitments for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Iran responded by announcing plans for a new, undisclosed enrichment site. Israeli strikes targeted Iranian nuclear facilities, missile production centers, and senior military officials almost immediately after that announcement. Then came June 21, 2025, a date that permanently altered the course of history. The United States joined Israel in striking 3 of Iran's most critical nuclear sites: Fordow, Isfahan, and Natanz, marking the first time an American president directly attacked another nation's nuclear infrastructure in coordination with an ally. Iran retaliated. A ceasefire followed. But that ceasefire collapsed almost as quickly as it formed. And by February 28, 2026, full-scale war had erupted. The initial strikes reportedly killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Within hours, his son Mojtaba Khamenei was appointed as his successor. Iran declared total war that very same day. The current ceasefire is built on a 15-point framework the United States passed to Iran through Pakistan, acting as a middleman, linking sanctions relief and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to Iran scaling back its nuclear program and reducing its missile presence. Officials close to Trump went even further in public, suggesting the possibility of deploying special operations forces into Iran to physically secure enriched uranium stockpiles. Iran's position is straightforward. The regime remains in power, or nothing is agreed upon. Accepting American terms at this point would appear, and Tehran's leadership understands this completely, like unconditional surrender disguised as diplomacy. What makes this ceasefire even more fragile is what Iran has already done with the strait. After briefly reopening it, Iran shut it down again, and reports from the region suggest some ships are now being allowed through only after paying Iran directly, sometimes in Chinese yuan, sometimes in cryptocurrency. That is not the behavior of a country preparing to compromise. That is a country demonstrating to the world exactly how much leverage it holds and how long it can apply it. The gap between what Washington demands and what Tehran is willing to accept is not a simple negotiating distance. It is a strategic divide, and 2 weeks is nowhere near enough time to bridge it. Step 1. The Strait of Hormuz becomes a weapon once again. Roughly 20 million barrels of oil and petroleum products pass through the Strait of Hormuz every single day, accounting for about a quarter of all global seaborne oil trade and nearly 1/5 of total worldwide consumption. When Iran shut it earlier in this conflict, crude prices surged past $100 a barrel, and the International Energy Agency released around 400 million barrels from strategic reserves just to slow the impact. But here is what that response cannot solve. The bypass pipelines, designed to reroute Gulf oil around the strait, can only handle between 3.5 and 5.5 million barrels per day combined, and that is their absolute limit. The gap between 20 million barrels of daily flow and just 5.5 million in alternative capacity cannot be closed with existing infrastructure. A prolonged shutdown does not create a temporary price spike. It creates a structural fracture in global energy supply that reserves can cushion but never fully repair. Around 70 to 82% of the oil moving through Hormuz is destined for Asian markets, with China, India, Japan, and South Korea receiving the largest portions. Japan relies on that region for roughly 75% of its oil, meaning a sustained closure would not slow its economy gradually, it would bring it to a halt. And when the world's third largest economy freezes, the financial shockwaves ripple across every global market within days. Step 2. The proxy network activates. Iran spent decades building its regional influence through the Quds Force, the external operations branch of the Revolutionary Guard, training and funding an estimated 140,000 to 185,000 Allied fighters across Afghanistan, Gaza, Lebanon, Pakistan, Syria, and Yemen. Hezbollah, the Houthis, and multiple Iraqi Shiite militias all operate within this network, and each of them has both the capability and the incentive to engage. Hezbollah entered this conflict after already taking significant damage from sustained Israeli air and ground operations. Before the war escalated, Hezbollah was estimated to possess between 130,000 and 150,000 rockets and missiles. By early 2026, Israeli and independent assessments had reduced that stockpile to somewhere between 11,000 and 25,000 remaining projectiles. That drop is significant. But even 25,000 rockets launched from Lebanon, combined with Iranian ballistic missiles coming from the east, still has the capacity to overwhelm layered air defense systems through sheer saturation. The Houthis in Yemen had already shown what reach looks like long before the 2026 war. More than 90 commercial vessels were attacked across the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. Over 2,000 ships were forced to reroute away from that corridor by early 2024, and Suez Canal container traffic collapsed by 72% in November 2024 compared to the previous year.
That level of disruption came from a single proxy actor operating before full-scale war even began. Now add Hezbollah, plus Iraqi militias that carried out more than 200 attacks on U.S. and Israeli targets in Iraq and Syria during the Gaza war period alone, and the scale of what Iran can activate across multiple fronts becomes impossible to ignore.
Step 3. The United States already has more than 50,000 troops in the region, and the ground question has no clean answer. By late March 2026, U.S. forces had surged to over 50,000 personnel, around 10,000 above normal peacetime levels, with 2,500 Marines and 2,500 sailors aboard the USS Boxer and accompanying naval assets forming a major part of that buildup. Multiple reports placed elements of the 82nd Airborne Division on standby for possible deployment. Airstrikes can degrade Iran's military capabilities. They can hit nuclear infrastructure, disrupt air defenses, and damage oil facilities like Karg Island, which U.S. and Israeli forces have struck repeatedly during this war. What air power cannot guarantee is regime compliance, permanent dismantlement of nuclear capability, or control over territory required to enforce any post-war framework. The ground option remains in every planning document, but it is spoken of in silence, because the moment it shifts from contingency to execution, the entire nature of the war changes. And the consequences of that shift are the kind that can be modeled but never truly controlled. Step 4. The economic damage reaches far beyond the battlefield. The UN Development Program estimated that the broader Middle East conflict could cost between $120 billion and $194 billion in lost economic output, equal to a regional GDP decline of roughly 3.7% to 6%. And those figures were calculated before any potential escalation restart, meaning they represent a baseline, not a ceiling. Oil above $100 a barrel does not stay confined to the region. It feeds into fuel prices for American logistics companies, which pass costs to distributors, which ultimately hit consumers at the grocery store. Inflation that had been easing begins to reappear, and the IMF has already warned that prolonged conflict could push up global food and fertilizer prices while also disrupting critical materials used in semiconductor and EV supply chains. With both the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea under pressure, global shipping routes are forced to detour around Africa, adding 10 to 14 days to major trade lanes, increasing insurance premiums, and slowing the flow of goods into ports worldwide. None of this remains local. It feeds directly into global supply chains, prices, and household costs. Step 5. The human cost continues to rise. Iran's ambassador to the United Nations reported more than 1,500 civilian deaths inside Iran since the war began, along with 3.2 million people displaced internally. The human rights activists' news agency placed the death toll far higher at over 30,000, though verification remains difficult due to nationwide internet blackouts and restricted access. On the American side, 13 U.S. service members had been killed as of early April 2026. In Israel, 2 civilians were killed in a Hezbollah missile strike on Haifa, with 4 more injured in a separate strike on Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the UAE all reported strikes on refineries, desalination plants, and petrochemical facilities. During the same period, Iran launched intermediate-range ballistic missiles toward Diego Garcia, the joint U.S.-UK base in the Indian Ocean,
One missile failed, another was intercepted, but the message was already clear. Iran was demonstrating a range capability that Western planners had not fully accounted for, and that reality is now embedded in every strategic calculation moving forward. The ceasefire exists on paper. The United States is demanding Iran dismantle its nuclear program and dismantle the proxy network it built over decades. Iran is demanding an end to the bombing and the survival of its government.
Neither side has shifted meaningfully toward the other. Iran has already reclosed the Strait of Hormuz after briefly reopening it, and the 2-week clock is still ticking. Iranian parliamentary speaker Mohammad Bakir Kalibaf stated Iran's position plainly. If American forces strike Iranian power infrastructure, Iran will fully shut the Strait of Hormuz and regional critical infrastructure will be, his words, irreversibly destroyed. That single word carries the entire weight of the warning, because it is not ambiguity. It is intent stated in advance. Now you understand what is at stake, and why the ceasefire clock is moving faster than anyone in Washington wants to admit. Stay with me, because this story is far from over. This is the video for today. If you want my ebook, link in the description. See you later.